Hi, folks. Good morning. This is a real privilege to give a hyperbole talk at AGU. And this experiment was done aboard a refurbished, modified DC-9 aircraft, which flew out of Ellington Field outside Johnson Space Center. And experiments were done with two groups of students. And the motivation was to study the behavior of a water column aboard the DC-9 aircraft under microgravity conditions. As you know, on Earth, gravity dominates. And so if you try to produce a liquid column between two contact disks, it will break apart very quickly within a few millimeters. So what we did was, with 4 students, we designed a console, which is basically a cube with polymer sheets and 2020 cylindrical tubes. And on this side, you have syringe going in, and orthogonally, we had 2 video cameras recording the data. So when you take a shower, essentially, the water coming out of the faucet breaks into droplets instead of being in a cylindrical column. And the reason is simple, that gravity dominates, and there is actually a certain critical length, which is known as the Rayleigh length, which is roughly about pi times the diameter of the nozzle through which the liquid is coming out. And at that critical length, due to increased perturbations, the liquid water column breaks into droplets. So our idea was to see if we can do the experiment, and under reduced gravity conditions, surface tension will dominate instead of gravity. And the experiment involves 2 different syringes, one 3 milliliter and the other 10 milliliter. We had an assortment of these kind of syringes, and we did the experiment. And as you can see in the middle section, you have extended liquid columns that were produced under zero gravity. And this happens because surface tension is much more powerful than gravity. And we found that for 3 milliliter syringes, we are able to produce a water column of almost 5.5 centimeters. And for the 10 milliliter syringe, we were able to produce a water column of almost 6.4 centimeters. And in addition to that, we noticed different kinds of behavior of the water column when the flight was going through hypergravity, zero gravity, and another hypergravity section. And there were 30 parabolas that the plane executed in 90 minutes. And that's what actually causes people to vomit aboard the plane. So you actually get an injection of scopolamine, which prevents you from vomiting. And it is given intravenously or in a tablet form. I took it intravenously, and it really settled my stomach and prevented me from vomiting during the 90-minute flight. So we had 2 sets of experiments done with 2 students on one flight and another 2 students on a separate flight aboard the Comet, and with one mentor, myself on one flight, and a NASA mentor, Brad Carpenter, on the second flight. And if you see this video on the right here, you can see my wedding ring flying out. It came out of my finger and flew out, and I could never find it. And I tried to explain it to my wife, that it was on a NASA aircraft, and I didn't lose it anywhere else. And for evidence, I showed her the actual video taken by NASA. That saved my marriage. And this is the zero-G flight on November 11th. And these are the university students and the NASA personnel on the zero-G flight. And we got to do some cool things, like basically flying like astronauts do in the aircraft under weightlessness conditions. And so this experiment actually can be extended to the International Space Station, where you can do this for extended periods of time. here in this particular experiment, we only had, not more than a few seconds, or at least of the order of 30 seconds or so on an extended flight to do the actual experiment. But we were able to do it 30 times because these parabolas are repeated 30 times during the 90-minute flight. So the interesting part of this experiment was that it was designed by students and tested for breakage by dropping it from a height of 1 meter and make sure the video cameras survive, the syringes survive, the cylinder survives, and the whole unit survives, because you're going to have mechanical vibrations on board the Varmint Comet. So we started roughly in May, June, after the semester ended, and we were able to build this module from off-the-shelf items that you can buy from Walmart and online from Amazon. And it was something that was built on a very thrifty scale, and so one can actually do these kind of experiments on a shoestring budget if you design it properly and test it properly. And the students were able to experience this wonderful zero-gravity, microgravity aircraft ride on a plane out of Ellington Field, which is just outside Johnson Space Center. And these were all Howard University students. Ajamu, Janelle, Aral, shown here. On another flight, we had Ryan O'Donnell and Brad Carpenter also on those flights. So in the future, we want to design an experiment for the International Space Station where instead of a syringe, where you're only producing the liquid column for a short period of time, we'll be able to have a continuous flow of water and then be able to make the testing much more repetitive so that we can collect meaningful data for large number of samples and do a statistical analysis. So all of the data that was recorded on these two flights, we managed to analyze it, and it was published last year as a refereed journal paper. And the students have now moved on, and most of them are attending graduate school at well-known PhD programs. So this was a really good experience to put on their resume. It made them stand out, and when they wrote the essay, the entering graduate school essay, it really made them stand out when they described their experience aboard the zero-G plane. And the SPS, the Society of Physics Students Observer, brings out a magazine, and there was an article written by the students for this magazine, and there's a picture of Aral Yarber with her hair flying out aboard the microgravity plane, which went viral on YouTube. It was so popular that it got tremendous number of hits on YouTube. So thank you very much for your attention, and any questions, I'll be happy to field some.